This is my X89 XL Sportster 1200, and I want to point out something because a lot of people sometimes they bitch about Harley Davidson being too expensive a bike to repair, and it all depends on what you're doing. Especially if you take your bike to a dealership, they're going to charge you top dollar. And I'm going to point out something else too about the clutch. Because a lot of people, I don't know, they might ride pretty hard and stuff. First off, get yourself this tool right here. This is a clutch spring compressor tool. The clutch spring actually looks like a large convex or concave washer that compresses, and you got to compress it so you can remove the nut, and then you can take out all the clutch shells. It's only this simple tool. You need this special tool from what, I don't know any way around it. You take off, your primary cover, and it's very simple to do. But a lot of times what these clowns do at the dealership is they replace the whole clutch pack. I'm going to tell you a couple things. First off, you're taking out these these clutch discs. Like you have the metal disc and the clutch disc, metal disc in between the clutch disc, right? Basically the clutch material and the metal disc. Usually the clutch material is what wears out, but typically you don't need to change the whole clutch pack. So what I've done is I stick with the Harley stuff, because I actually had Kevlar clutch material in here, basically a pressure plate material. And the Kevlar, I don't really think it was any really better than the Harley stuff, to tell you the truth. I don't know. For me, it almost seemed like the Harley stuff was better. But you know what made the difference if you're really jumping on the bike and you're really, nailing it hard all the time, is to actually put in a heavier duty clutch spring. Which means when you're pulling this in during traffic, you can feel it. But you notice I have this on the clutch side, not so much on the brake side. On the clutch side, I have like some leather wrapped around here. And that's because I got the heavier spring. And, if you're in traffic, you're constantly, doing this, letting in out the clutch. And your hand gets, with the leather, it doesn't seem to get as tired. I don't know what the deal is. So I put a little leather wrap around it. So if you put a heavy-duty clutch spring, that's one of the complaints, that if you're in traffic, it sucks having this damn, having a heavy clutch. But that's what makes the difference. And in durability, I really didn't see any real difference between the Kevlar. And I know the racers use the Kevlar, but I tried it and I was like, I don't know what the hell this is. It burns out too, because I used to really race this. I used to run this bike hard. But when I'm in traffic, I found out, well, actually, you want to grip the clutch a little more towards the edge. That gives you more, it's not so hard to pull it in. That's what a lot of times I do. But also putting this leather around here, for some reason or another, if you're in traffic and you got the heavy spring, you're dealing with, the clutch in and out because you're stop and go, and you can't white line. That alleviates, at least to me, that alleviates the problem, the disadvantage of having the heavy-duty clutch spring. With the heavy-duty clutch spring is really what makes these clutch material last a lot longer, because it clamps a lot harder. So when you jump on it, you let it out, it really holds it. Now, the other thing is, if you take this to a bike shop, they'll change the whole damn clutch pack. You're better off, if you do this stuff yourself, get that tool, like the one I showed you right here, this one, right? Get that tool and buy a clutch pack. Just buy a standard Harley Davidson replacement type. And when you take these apart, you'll find out most of them aren't screwed up. It's usually like two of them, or one or two of them, that are screwed up, that are slipping. And that's all you change. And all the rest of them, you leave it in there. So basically, if you took it down to a dealership, they'll change out, say you're wearing out the clutch every year practically, right, because you're riding the bike hard. They'll change out the clutch pack in its entirety every freaking time. In reality, you could buy one clutch pack, and it's usually only a couple of the clutch rings that need to be changed. You don't need to change them all out. So that's what they don't tell you that shit. See, that's a big difference, especially if you're doing it yourself, you're using the tool. It's not that hard to do, and you just buy one set of parts, and it's like good for like 3 or 4 clutch changes, because you're only changing out 1 or 2 pressure plates. That's all you're doing. And the heavy spring is worth it. So those are some tips. Now the other thing is, so you're going to take off, you know, it's behind here. I'm not going to take this off. I had this off here a zillion times for different shit. But there's a large nut that's on the crank side where the crank sprocket is. That thing either, now I have an impact wrench, you can get it off. I think, if I can't remember right, it might be 1 1/4 inches. I believe that's the size. I ain't sure. It's a pretty damn big one. But when I didn't have access to an impact wrench, what I used to use was the pipe. But what I did was I jammed a piece of wood in here. You see, you can't use the pipe with the 1/2-inch breaker bar. You know, the pipe has leverage to break that loose, because what happens is the whole clutch pack slips. Even though you have it in gear and you have the brake on and all that, the brake on the other side, you have the brake on. What you have to do is you put a piece of wood in here, not a piece of metal, a piece of wood, and that jams up between the primary chain and the gear, and it doesn't hurt nothing. That's what holds it from moving. You don't need the special Harley Davidson tool. You just need a piece of wood. I've done this many times. If you have the impact, you got no problem. But I've had the impact, but I've done it the other way too, with the pipe and a piece of wood that's jammed up in there. Now, you don't need to remove that to remove the clutch pack, but you know, I'm just pointing this out as this tip in this same video rather than making a separate video, because a lot of people don't know that. And see, that's why they don't work on a bike, and that's why they buy all these special tools, and that's why it's expensive, because they're not thinking. So actually, to remove this first nut, you don't even need an impact. You can use a large pipe like this. You got to put it in gear. You got to hold the brake down in the front brake, and you press. I always push this bar up with my shoulder, with the breaker bar on the end of the nut here, with this cover off, right? But what keeps the whole thing from spinning, because it would slip on the clutch pack back here, right? What keeps it from spinning is you put a piece of wood in between the primary chain and the gear, and it jams it all up, right? And it keeps it from spinning, and then you can get the nut off. Works every freaking time. No special tools. So that's where some people get blowing money on this stuff. So I just want to pass this on, because it doesn't have to be expensive, believe me.